Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Can You Hack It? I am Ben. You may also know me as Iceman on various websites like Hackthebox. This week we're taking a look at another system from Hackthebox, and this one is Chatterbox. Chatterbox is a Windows system with a medium level of difficulty. This one was actually a big pain in the ass for a lot of people. And so in this video, we're actually going to dig into why it was such a pain, or at least my hypothesis behind it. Some of this is going to be theory because I don't have access to the actual VM, so I can't tell for sure. But anyway, we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and start off like we always do. We've got our IP address here, 10.10.10.74. We will open up a command prompt. I actually don't remember if I'm connected here or not. 10.74. We're not. Okay, so let's get connected. Let's open another tab under a Chatterbox folder. Okay, and so we'll do our Nmap scan as always. T5. Oops. E-SC-SV. So let's enumerate our scripts and enumerate versions. We're going to output in all formats to Nmap quick and 10.10.10.74. And so this will run, and actually I'm going to take a move from IPsec here and cancel that out. I've actually already got a scan. On this box, you have to do a full scan to get the open ports that matter. So instead, we'll just take a look at map full or scan all ports. And so we can see here that there's two ports open, port 9255 and 9256. And so if we Google those, port 9255, 9256 in Windows, and we come up first few hits after the speed test result all refer to a piece of software called Achat, and it looks like it's got a structured exception handling buffer overflow. And so basically if we look here at exploit DB, looks like there's a Metasploit module for it. And so what we can do is go ahead and try Metasploit against it. Now this is where I'm going to do something a little different than I normally do. I've actually got another VM set up over here. This one's running Achat on Windows, similar to the actual Chatterbox. The reason we're going to do this is Chatterbox is sensitive. If we do the wrong thing, it will crash and we'll have to reset the system in order to get back into a state where we continue on. My hypothesis behind this is that if you do certain things, you cause an exception to pop up and the app doesn't completely crash. It just sits on a window waiting for somebody to accept. And I think what's happening is they have a script to restart it when the process goes away. But if the process doesn't go away and it's just hung there, then it doesn't restart it, and then nobody can access it until the system's actually restarted. So we're going to look at it on my VM instead of the real one so that we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open Achat. It's running. We don't need to actually do anything with it. We'll go back to our Kali Linux machine. And so let's start out using Metasploit. I don't like to normally, and in this case you're going to see a few of the reasons why. First of all, obviously, you learn more if you do things a little, the more towards doing it completely manually, the more you're going to typically learn. Metasploit's great if you're just trying to rush through something really fast and your goal isn't learning. So let's do a quick search for Achat. And so we find one exploit here. So we're going to use, we'll do show options, see what options it has. Looks like it has an R host, so we'll set R host 10.10.10.74. And then we'll set our payload to just a typical like a Windows meterpreter. Have complete It's extra slow today. Reverse TCP. And now we need to set our local stuff. Yeah. Set lhost 10, 10, 14, 15. We can leave it on port 444. And so now what we'll do is we'll tell it to exploit. And we failed because there's no encoders available for the buffer, or sorry, we weren't able to successfully encode the buffer. So if we do an info here and see info about this exploit, we can see that the payload information, we have 730 bytes available for our payload, and we need to avoid 129 characters. We'll dig into that, and actually, no, let's dig into that now. So if we use one of these other links here, I believe it's this one from exploit.db. Yes, so we've got a Python script. Let's view it in raw view. We've got a Python script here to exploit that buffer overflow. We'll open this up in Sublime Text. No, we won't do it now. Okay, and so you can see here they were kind enough to leave the MSF Venom instructions in here for what they did. And so in this case, we'll try out this payload in a second, but first let's duplicate it. Let's create our own payload that's similar to what we're trying to do in Metasploit right now. So we've got the list of bad characters. And so let's paste that. Leave this. Let's not make the payload a Windows executable or executing calc. Let's do the same one. So Windows meterpreter reverse TCP. We're going to need to set lhost to 10, 10, 14, 15, and lport to 4444. You can leave it on Unicode mixed, although technically Meterpreter I don't think is trying, or sorry, Metasploit's payload is trying to use this. They're probably using no encoding, but we can try with no encoding and see if this works. No, I wasn't able to find one, so, which is the issue that Metasploit's probably having if we give it an encoder. So we'll do x86 alpha mixed, which tells it to use mixed alpha characters. That should work. Okay, and so that did generate a payload, but if we scroll up here, we can see that the payload size, well actually in this case we fit barely. The payload size is 720 bytes. And so why don't we take this then and try and use it. So by the way, without the encoding, if I would have used, or if it would have shown us, we would have seen that the size of the payload was larger than that 730 bytes that we saw in Metasploit, which is why it wasn't able to find an encoder that got it down to the size that would allow it to work. And so in here, let's substitute their payload where they are running the calc executable calculator. Substitute it with ours. Now I personally like to leave this stuff here, and so I just comment it out, and that way I know what was used to generate it, if the encoder was compatible, what the encoder was, what the final payload size was, what the size of the actual Python file is, just because it's valuable to see. Otherwise, if you open this up and all you saw was this buffer of hex encoded values, you wouldn't know what the hell it was. So let's save this in Chatterbox as, since I know this is going to fail, I'm just going to call it fail.py. So now we've got fail.py. We technically need a handler just in case this somehow worked, so let's do use exploit multi-handler, show options, set payload, Windows, meterpreter, reverse TCP, set lhost 10.10.14.15, show options, we should be good now. We are, and then run. Okay, so we're waiting for a connection now. So now we do Python fail.py. Let me make sure real quick that Achat's still running. Okay, so Achat is still running. Poof, it says it worked. Sorry, I missed something simple there. Let's just fix that. Down here we have an IP address of who we send it to, and this is not who we want to send it to. 192.168. I think it's 1.160 is my Windows VM. So we'll save that. We actually have another problem then that I missed, so we'll fix that. I'm using my Hackthebox IP address instead of the local one, so this wouldn't work even if it was compatible payload. 192.168.1.146. Okay. Sorry about that. Every once in a while, forget something important. That's how you learn. Okay, so let's comment these back out. Now we're ready to go. So Python test.py. Oh, sorry, Python fail.py. Poof. And poof. So this is what I was referring to. See how it crashed? And if we look at our task manager here, it's still running. So if something was watching to see if Achat was running, it would see Achat is still running because the process for it is. And then the problem is we'll go ahead and close that. And then that's when people ended up having to reset the box. And this is one of those boxes where if you were on the free servers, you were pretty much screwed because somebody was always resetting it. And the way that this exploit works, only one person can really be doing it at a time. Once somebody's done this, whether it crashes like that, or it's hanging on an exception handler, or it crashes and just completely crashes out. Either way, it fails. I think on their box they had it set up so that when the process died, they restarted it. So if somebody exploited it successfully, you could end up getting in a second. So let's make this payload actually work now. All we should need to do that is to change this over to Unicode instead of alpha. And we'll still use the meterpreter payload. I'll explain another caveat on that in a second. So notice now that using the Unicode encoder that our payload's too large. It's 792 bytes according to the Metasploit module. In actuality, I haven't found that that matters too much. You can go over that and the exploits still work perfectly fine. And so just be aware of that. I think that's why for a lot of people this script worked better than Metasploit did. So actually, before I run this, let's hop back into Metasploit because I want to show another problem which still goes back to the same original problem that people were having. Let's go back to using the Achat. Set payload. So there's a bunch of payloads that are a lot smaller. Just a plain old shell, reverse, ordinal TCP. Those are super small. Shell options. And so this should easily fit and easily encode because it's probably like 100 byte payload. Set our host to 192.168.1.160. Again, we're doing the local box just so that we don't crash the real one. Set L host to 192.168.1.146. So then if I exploit, this time it was able to send it. It was able to open a session, but as you can see now it's hanging. If we go back to Achat, same thing I was talking about before, where the application's still open and it's hanging on a window that's saying it stopped working. This time we can debug it since I have Visual Studio installed. And so what you can see is there was actually an access violation, and it was trying to read a location that it's not allowed to. So there was an issue with our payload that caused it to try and read in an area of memory that's marked off limits. And so once that happens, the OS is going to kill it. So those are the reasons that people had such a hard time with this box, is stuff like that kept happening. Anytime you chose the wrong payload, the wrong encoding, other things like that, you could get the box into a state where it needed a reboot. And as you know, reboot on Hackthebox takes 2 minutes. If nobody cancels it, if you're on the public server where there's hundreds of people sometimes, someone's always bound to cancel it. And so it was frustrating for a lot of people, I think. So now let's not worry about using Metasploit other than for receiving our connection. So we'll switch back to the multi-handler. We'll set the payload to Windows, meterpreter. I can't spell. And my tab completion is super slow. Oh, sorry. Set payload. It's meterpreter. Reverse TCP. Show options. See if these are still set. Set L host to 192.168.1.146 and run. Okay, so this is waiting for a meterpreter shell then. And so back in here, we've got our meterpreter reverse TCP going to the right port using the Unicode encoding. So let's take this and let's put that over here. Well, actually, I'm going to leave this one as it is. It's a calculator one. We'll just do calc.py. I'll fix fail.py so that it works now. Okay, our IP address is correct there. Let's take this, because it's not going to be correct here. So not make that mistake twice. Okay, so now fail.py and calc.py should work. We'll run calc.py just for fun first so that you can see Python calc.py. So poof, if we switch back over, our Achat application has exited cleanly and we have 2 calculators open, and the reason for that has to do with the way that this exploit works, where you have 2 threads that are running at the same time. But we won't go into that. So there we have the calculator open. That's wonderful. Now let's see if we can get a reverse shell. We'll use Python fail.py again. Make sure that we're listening. We are listening. Okay, poof again. Come back here. Got a bunch of junk in here. It's hung, but it hasn't crashed. And if we look over here, we've got a meterpreter session now. We can enter a shell. Now, meterpreter also didn't work on this box. So if you would have followed these exact steps, it would have failed. You would have gotten a connection back. The connection would have almost immediately died. I don't have a good theory on why that was happening. My assumption is it had something to do with network latency, possibly, or some setting on the box that caused it to have a similar access violation or other crash when you tried to use the payload of meterpreter. In this case, it seems to work fine in this local environment, but we won't worry about that too much. What we can do instead is use which I guess I'll do here too, just so that we can see it, and then we can pivot it over. We'll use a lighter payload. We'll use a Windows shell reverse TCP. So everything else stays about the same. So we copy this. Notice again we're still over the payload size, but it's fine. So we'll put this into our fail and comment, save it. And then let's see, we will do Python .py. I don't remember if I restarted Achat. I did. Okay, poof. Oh, I forgot to update my handler. That's not going to work. So that vanished. That's fine. Let's set payload Windows shell reverse TCP. We're good on those. Run. Do it again. And there we go. We've got a shell again. I didn't personally feel the need to use meterpreter on here at all. Some people really love it. So just to cover for them how you would get to meterpreter from here, because a lot of people seem to think that you need to use it as your original payload, which you don't. You just hit Control-Z, background it. So now that session's been sent to the background. We can do a use multi manage shell to meterpreter show options. Okay, so we don't actually need to set the L host in this case. We can just set session to our last session, which we see up here, session 5, and then run. So it's going to use session 5 to upgrade and create a meterpreter shell, and this will work on the real box as well. This isn't something that only worked on my local box. So as you see, meterpreter opened to session 6 now, and that one's actually a meterpreter session. Session 5 is still open as well, which is kind of nice because then you have a session in the background in case you screw something up. And so there we see we have our meterpreter now that's connected. Conductor. So let's get out of this. Use multi-handler. Oh, sorry. Export multi-handler. Set payload. We'll use the Windows shell reverse TCP. Options. Set our L host. We're going to go to the real box now. So this was a little detour. I will put something in the YouTube video so that you can skip over the detour if it wasn't interesting to you. And so run. So that is ready to go. And we're just going to need to make a quick tweak to this so that we're going to the right place, which is 10.10.10.47. Oh, sorry, this is our local host, 10.10.14.15. And then when we go in the script, we'll update where it's writing to. So take that, and we'll stick it right there. Let's comment update this to 10.10.10.74. Save it. Save it as. Save as live. Okay. So now we can see what happens. Let's do ping real quick, make sure that we can. I didn't remember to reset this box ahead of time, so we'll see if this actually works. Python live.py. Poof. And I see some text in the background. There we have it. We've got a shell into the box. Let's do the upgrade the meterpreter just so that people see. Because for some reason a lot of people seem to think that it just wasn't possible. Which it's going to be the exact same as I just showed you, but use manage shell to interpreter and set shell 7 run. So that'll upgrade. And while we're waiting for this, by the way, when I first did this box, I tried so many different payloads, so many different techniques, tried a bunch of stuff where I was using the Windows exec, which they originally used in that script for calculator. I was using that to try and spawn crazy PowerShell stuff. None of it ended up working right. But, I mean, some of it did locally, but a lot of it didn't remotely. So, I mean, don't feel bad if you got stuck doing a million things. And actually, that's interesting. So, unable to execute the following command, echo a. Interesting. So that could have to do with why meterpreter isn't working for some people, maybe? I haven't actually seen that happen before because I ran this before. It's also possible somebody else is on this box and has done something that's made it unhappy. It looks like that time it worked. So sessions list. So now you can see, sorry, I just pointed at my screen with my finger. Now you can see we got a meterpreter session also. So we'll set sessions interactive 8. So now we've got our meterpreter. We'll drop into a shell from here. Oh, did I use the wrong session? Sorry about that. Set session. Yeah, session 7 should have been our show options. Yeah, that should all be good. Let's try this one more time. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Especially since we don't need it. This was more just to show people that it works. But, okay, that time, if it still does something screwy like that, I don't know. Because see here, we've got the right IP addresses. Sessions, interactive, 9. Okay, shell. There we go. Okay, who am I? Okay, so now we're Alfred on Chatterbox. So first things first, we can try and get the key, which is going to be in the home directory. So cd:/users Alfred, usually on the desktop. Okay, and we can see it's there. It's 32 long, so it's our hash. Let's see. Okay, and we'll try to see if we can get part of that token without showing you the whole thing. And user.text.substring So there you can see that we have our user user flag, or at least the first part of it. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. That way, if you decide to do this box after the fact, you still got to earn it. So now let's see. See if we can actually just get the administrators one. I doubt it, but so there's root.text. Shell get content root.text substring. Access to path is denied. Yada yada yada. So we can't get it directly. Let's see if we have, if we've got UAC enabled on this box. So do a reg query. Just going to look at a registry key. NH key local machine software. Microsoft Windows current version policies system enable LUA. It is at least enabled in some form. It's not completely disabled. If it was completely disabled, we would see a 0x0 here. Let's see what net user Alfred. So Alfred is a member of the users group. Membership none, workstation allowed. We can try and see if we can get read writes to this. So sometimes people misconfigure permissions, and so even though we can't technically read it, we may be able to allow ourselves to read it. And so if we do take own root.text, so that's denied. Use calcs root.text. Administrator, Chatterbox administrator has full permissions on it. Achat root.text. We can see we can grant Alfred. Let's give ourselves full permissions too. And so that actually looks like it proceeded. One file processed, 0 failed. And so then we should be able to do our PowerShell get content root.text substring. See if we can actually read it. And we can, so there's the first part of the root.text. And so that's really all there is to this box. It wasn't a tremendously difficult box, but it was a finicky box. The way that the exploit worked could cause a whole lot of headaches. I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the box author, that's just the way it works sometimes. I highly recommend on any box, once you've identified the path for entry, if it's something like, in this case, Achat, that you can publicly get it, set up a VM, test locally, if it's being finicky. If it's not being finicky, just bang away at the box. But some of these boxes, they're finicky sometimes, and so working with them locally, A, gives you more insight, and B, makes it so that you don't have to sit there waiting for resets. I've seen this with some other ones too, which I won't mention because they're still live, where there's software on them or other things that you're able to obtain. And people seem to be asking me tons and tons and tons of questions on how they do it, when they could answer all of those questions by simply running that stuff locally and experimenting with how it works, because you're not doing it blind anymore. You've got output from errors, you've got all kinds of logging sometimes, and so A, it helps you learn more because you're able to see what the consequences of what you're doing are, and B, you're able to do it a lot faster, usually because, again, you've got visibility. So keep that in mind when you're doing boxes. If you can do it locally, if you can run an app locally, like some web app, if you can use your tools against a local machine first, it's usually going to get you a lot more insight. And then you can go against the real box and take it down. But, you know, as always, feel free to reach out to me, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter. And if you have questions, always feel free to ask, but please don't ask me stuff like, how do I do this box? I'm not going to ever give you some answer like, oh, just go ahead and run this command, or, you know, I don't mind giving people pointers, but I seem to have a lot of people lately that seem to just be straight up asking me to give them the answer to a problem, and that's never going to happen, so save your time and mine. So I will see you with the next one, I suppose. Have a great weekend.